Plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click enter on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hi, this is Christine Joanna Hart, and welcome to Christine Joanna Hart Show. And I've started a little bit late tonight because it's all very hectic in London. There's been a few train strikes, and there was the big tower fire on today, and there was in St Paul's Cathedral there was a anniversary to mark the very, very, very sad destruction of Grenfell Tower. So that has thrown London into absolute and utter chaos tonight. So I got back late and I was cooking my son dinner, and he pointed out that my show was starting. So yeah, so that is happening right now, and it's all very upsetting in London. So I'm going to talk tonight about Ian Brady. I'm talking about Ian Brady tonight. That's the Moors murderer who's since passed away. And I'm talking about him because there's a feature about me going into a newspaper in January. And so it rather brought everything up about my books, etc., etc. And I have condensed my old books into one new book called Programmed to Murder. And I'm going to talk about that tonight. So anybody reading the piece can listen to me verbally as well as, before they buy the book. I mean, why not? I'm trying to get a publisher, but it's very difficult to get a publisher on the particular topic that I have written about, and I've written about mind control. That's right, mind control. It's a really hard thing, especially for the English to come to grips with. Seemingly, it's very easy for the Americans to come to grips with it, but not us. And probably that's because they're a little bit more advanced than us spiritually. They're kind of galloping ahead in, maybe not in the occult. After all, we, birthed Aleister Crowley here, but in the way of a sort of mass awakening of the mind and behavior. We tend to be so structured in the way we think here, and we've got the class system, and we're very much shut in little boxes, but the Americans are like wide open, consciously. And I found that quite hard, because when I lived in California back in the 90s, I did find it hard to take that their minds were so like expansive, and I just wanted to come back to the safe little world of England where everybody was, pretty much shut down. So I first heard of Monarch mind control when a woman called Anna Hart contacted me on Facebook Messenger, and she said to me that she had read my book In for the Kill that was published by Mainstream. That is a subsidiary of Trans World, and that's known either side of the either side of the Atlantic. My head is with my tomato sauce and meatballs, and I just kind of pulled them off the hob and left them there, so my head is kind of back there. So either side of the Atlantic, it's quite a good publisher. So it was my second book. My first one was published by Hodder and Stoughton, which became a Sunday Times bestseller, and you might think, ooh, that makes a lot of money. No, it doesn't really make a lot of money. It just means it came in, my particular book came in at number 15 and then went out again. And, it wasn't Jackie Collins or anything, but I do get to call myself that. And so why not? I haven't really achieved much in my life, so I'm going to wave that flag. So that was a what's known as a Sunday Times bestseller, meaning it got in the top 20. And the second book didn't fare very well, and I was rather disappointed in it. And it was during this disappointment that, and also I was being trolled. The book came out on Amazon, and there was a woman called Carol who was a member of a book club in my town, and she had heard about the book. It had just come out. It wasn't yet in the shops, and she stuck a review on Amazon calling herself just Carol Ann. I mistakenly thought it was someone else and put a review on their book. I don't know why I thought that immediately. It was kind of silly of me, but I took it down. I then felt quite annoyed at this person because I didn't feel they were that polite to me during the whole interchange. It was, after all, a natural mistake to make. But this woman, I think, did it deliberately. Carol. I know her second name. I'm not going to say it, but I'm not very happy with the trouble she caused. Then it rather drew the attention of some other heavyweight trolls, and for its first 3 years of coming out, it was it was mainly one, and Carol and another man who seemed to think I'd turned against him in some kind of way, and I hadn't. And he seemed to think I'd been trolling him, but actually it was another Nottingham journalist called Carl. So it all got quite messy and nasty, and I think a few people were sitting back having a chuckle to themselves. I felt bad about the whole thing. It made me feel very down, and I thought, what's the point in writing if when you try and bare your soul, then you get that kind of thing. There was the particular guy that was trolling me was pretty nasty and was picking me apart about my life adventures, and the main life adventures were The first one being that I met Ian Brady, the Moors murderer, on 3 occasions. Once when I went there myself after he invited me. The second time was when the press got hold of me, the Sunday People, and flew me up there. That lasted 10 minutes. And then a time that lasted over a few hours, that was supervised by his psychiatrist, Dr. Strickland. So, and that was when I was alone with him. And as a writer called Alan Keeley, who was a friend of Brady's and who gets very excited and lathered up over that visit. Bad luck, really. I've come across this before, had it with Chris Berry D, that is sometimes it's a case of, oh, I own that serial killer, and then someone else who's written about him will come out, no, I own him. I knew him best. I'm the one. People should come to me if they want to know about, and it ends up getting really silly and nasty. So just a little audio to Alan Keeley. You can have Brady. I don't want to be the one who knows all about his killings. I find them absolutely disgusting, and I wish I'd never had the horrible and rather boring experience of meeting Brady. Actually, it was very much a waste of my time. And on the third occasion, I had gone to hug him goodbye. I felt very... I had a lot of pity for Brady because he was kind of like, he's an old man. When I saw him, I was a young girl in my 20s, and he was an old man, smelling of urine, a mental hospital old man. And I had an uncle, adopted uncle, who was in that position in a mental hospital. And I just do feel a kind of Mother Teresa-like pity. And I sat there with him for over an hour. The hospital staff forgot me because I arrived late. And I arrived late every time I saw Brady. I'm just a latecomer. And they forgot I was there and left me there. So I had to tolerate Brady. And Brady is the most boring individual ever. And not only that, he's really, really arrogant. And so his conversation is stilted, and he thinks about what he says, and when he does finally come out with it, it's very, very boring. And he's a very fake kind of person. Like, he will talk like he's like Sean Connery, so he will talk like that, like Sean Connery, and it's like, please talk in your normal voice. His normal voice is like that. It's like a little girl. So of course he doesn't want to talk in his normal voice. And so it's a strain, and it was a strain. And I kept thinking, when is someone going to rescue me? Because it was a strain. And then he starts talking about, what he's done, and who wants to hear it? It's depressing. And luckily, finally, someone came in and said, time to go. So he stood up, or I stood up. I can't remember. I think it was I stood up thinking, yes. And I hugged him just to kind of hide the fact I was so excited to be getting out the door. I thought, I'm going to do something kind. And so I went over and hugged him. And when I was doing that, he kind of got rather excited because he just had his medication, and sort of threw out his tongue down my throat. And I was quite shocked that it went on, and it was really weird. It was like, I don't know, it was like this darkness came over me. It was a really horrible, horrible feeling. And then this nurse came back in, and my whole face was wet because he is a mental patient, and mental patients aren't Mickey Rourke. They don't do something like that in a sexy or exciting or nice way. It's a disgusting way. So I had my face smelling of shit, which is spittle smell, and it was covered, and I was a beautiful young girl. I had Chanel powder on. I mean, do you want sort of serial killer jizz on your face? No. And I was in shock. And Alan Keeley gets so excited and worked up. And I put a review on his book because he had said in his book, she lied that Brady licked her face. And then it was more than licking my face. His tongue was right down my throat. And he grabbed me and pushed his body against me. I felt it. And hey, it's really small. That's probably why. He was a paedophile. And I felt this gunk. And someone like Ellen Keeley, an old man, goes on, oh, you're deluded, you fantasize it, you licked your face. No, darling, I'd fantasize about Mickey Rourke, Sylvester Stallone, a skanky old man in a nut house. No, darling, I'm sorry that it really hurts you, Alan Keeley, that I had that, if you want to call it closeness with a man that you revere, but I am so sorry, Alan, it went on. Now, I swear on my son's life that it went on, okay? I swear on my son dying of cancer that it went on, Alan Keeley. Do you understand me? You absolute wretch. One thing I can't stand is someone that can't be honest in their own hearts and say, that makes me sad. That makes me jealous. I wanted to be close to him. You had that with him. That makes me feel jealous of you. No, instead of that, you start name calling me and calling me a liar, delusional fantasies. You do it one more time, Alan Keeley, I'll absolutely sue you, because I have someone who was a witness to the state I was in after, who is willing to go to court and wants me to sue Ashworth because of what I went through. So, Alan, I'm afraid you're going to have egg all over your envious, ridiculous face. Wake up, man. That's a dirty, stinking paedophile you're getting envious about, you absolute turd. So anyway, as I was saying, I stood up. Then the nurse came in. I went out to the toilet and I washed my face. Eventually, when I got out of there, they left me alone again. I had no choice but to go down to Brady's room to get him to show me out. I then went to Liverpool Street Station, and I don't know how I got there, because it was like I was floating. I felt really weird. And I got there, and I'd been seeing a hypnotherapist called Susanna, who was really good, and she was trying to get to my childhood stuff and the sexual abuse that I'd gone through with my father. And I rang her and I said, I need to see you now. And she said, well, you haven't got an appointment today. And I said, I really need to see you. Something's happened. And she said, oh my God, today is the day when you went to see him, wasn't it? And I said, yeah, please let me see you. She says, come straight away. So I got on the train. And I felt so bad. I felt really spaced out. And I couldn't work out why. I just was so spaced out. And then I don't know how I got to her place. It was in Gloucester Place, and I actually got to her door. And I've never believed that someone could knock down someone's door. I've heard of the term before, to knock down someone's door, and I literally did it to her door. I just banged my fists again and again on the door, and I slid down the door, and I just sat there, and she came out and helped me upstairs, and she gave me some brandy, and I sat and cried. And after a while, when I'd been drinking the brandy, I felt better. And I said, oh, Susanna, I feel better. How did you do it? And she said, you're in shock. And I was in shock, but I didn't know I was. She knew. And I sat there for a while, and I said, he kissed me. And she said, what do you mean? I said, yeah, he kissed me, but if you can call it that, it was really horrible. He sort of gobbed all over my face and shoved his tongue in my throat. And it was a relief to tell her. And she said, oh, okay, that's fine. And I said, why do I feel weird? I feel like my head is up at the ceiling and my body's down there. And she leaned forward and she said, because he killed people. And it kind of made me touch down, and I realized that it was okay to feel how I felt. It was okay to feel in shock. And she said to me that she thought he would put a knife down my face. She had been reading the letters that Ian Brady sent to me before the visit, and they were very, they've been published in a newspaper. They were things like, and I still have them, obviously, we will be alone together. How does it make you feel? Are you afraid I might bite you? Because he thinks he's Hannibal Lecter. And she said to me she didn't want me to go. She said she thought he'd smuggle in a knife or a fork and drag it down my face. She said just because he could, and to ruin my looks. I was attractive back then. Yeah, and it just felt, I think after that, it just felt as if it was just too much. The whole thing that I got into of trying to find out why he did it, exactly the same as you, Alan Keeley, trying to be the big star, the big hero, the one that writes the book that says, oh, this is the last word on, I'm the one who knows all his secrets. I mean, it's absolutely pathetic, Alan Keithley. And it was absolutely pathetic that I was the same kind of creep, you know, without any thought to the victims, just that ambition. I'm trying to excuse myself in the fact that I was highly intelligent, had gone to grammar school, had been in with a chance, had met girls that went off to Oxford and Cambridge. And my mother, my adoptive mother, Betty Hart, was really, really envious of me. And so she did everything in her power to make me fail. And I was a top A student, 95%, 98%, and I failed deliberately so she wouldn't hate me anymore. It was facing that jealousy day in, day out. I couldn't handle it. I felt like scratching myself. There, look, I'm scratched up. I'm not pretty anymore. Just stop hating me. And so I failed at school to stop her hating me. And the repercussions of that are still evident in my life now. It's horrible to be highly intelligent and yet not have that. I don't know what it is that you don't have, you know, because I caught up later and I did take an O-level early and I did go and get a degree at the University of North London. But it's like it doesn't mean anything if you do it when you're old somehow. It's like, oh, and did you get a degree when you're old kind of thing. I don't know if other people feel that way, but it affected me because I didn't start building when I was young, and I didn't go to university when I was young and make the kind of friends that you're supposed to make at university and then go into a job and, you know, meet a husband. I was very much hanging out with skinheads, and, you know, I had all that period of really, really rough boyfriends and where all we do was watch Coronation Street. And that was all through my teenage years and all through my 20s. And because I had the interest in Brady, and because he had returned my letters, and actually I found them so boring. I would sit with a boyfriend, Ray, and we would read them and skip and laugh at them. And then when he invited me to see him, I thought, well, I'll do a book on this. Oh, this is something in my scuzzy little working class life of my boyfriend Ray and sitting around his bedsit and smoking weed. This will be something. And so I went to see him, and I suppose the third time was pure ambition. It was pure ambition by then to be the same as Alan wants, to be that. And now I've matured, I realize what an absolutely stupid ambition to know the thoughts of a madman. And this on, I couldn't believe it when I looked on Amazon and saw the comments. Unbelievable. This utter, and Alan doesn't seem to think that Ian Brady is crazy. He's a nutter. As somebody once said to me, why are you interested in why he did it? He's just a nutty northerner. And that actually is the bottom line. And so I decided that I didn't like the pathway that I had taken, and it was a stupid ambition, and I wanted to kind of clean it all out of my head somehow. I hadn't managed with Susanna to get to all these childhood memories of my sexual abuse. I had a few, obviously, but I wanted to clean them all out and just be like a normal girl. And I knew trying to be some kind of super journalist that I wasn't really healthy. And there was a kind of thing going on with Brady that wasn't to do with me writing. It was more like I wanted to kind of lure him in and then screw him up in a quite a personal, nasty way. So that was going on too. And there was the wanting people to believe that my father had sexually abused me. Now, my cousins, Dolores and Emma in Ireland, didn't believe me. And it was a case of, oh, Uncle Tommy, oh, Uncle Tommy's lovely. And she's so evil. She's a dirty liar, saying that, oh, Uncle Tommy touched her. Uncle Tommy's lovely. So that hurt me. It does hurt people that have been sexually abused, especially if it's by their fathers. Okay, mine was adopted, but still same thing. And it really hurts to not be believed. Not only do you have to go through it, then you have some skank saying, oh, it's not true, they're a really nice guy. Or same with Brady. That was abuse, really. Brady was an old guy. Okay, he was medicated up to the nines, but really to smear his jizz over me, knowing what he did, act somebody up, and the rest of the things, to a beautiful young girl, that's abuse. It's abuse. He knows he's smearing. So it, I felt dirty, and I wanted to kind of wash it all away. And I'd read about the primal scream by Arthur Janoff, and so I'd rang them and they said I could come along, and I'd saved up, I think, £3,000. So I went out there, and I signed up to primal therapy. Now the £3,000 went really, really super quickly. It actually went so quickly, it is unreal. So yeah, that was difficult because I was left there. I was out in Los Angeles. I'd started the primal therapy, which is where you go into a room with a therapist and they kind of mother you. Now, I never had anybody being nice to me. And so Barry Bernfeld, who was my therapist there, was really, really nice to me in this little dimly lit room. And they just sit with you like for 2 hours a day, and they kind of soften you up. And by the end of like 3 months, I was absolutely in love with him. What it was is known as transference. And literally it was a physical thing. My whole body was yearning for him. My mind, my emotions, my body craved him. I was like a tiny baby, and he was my gorgeous mother who I just wanted to just snuggle. So being that I wasn't a baby, it sort of formed into kind of an obsession, or a kind of a addiction. It was horrible. It was like being in love, I would imagine. I've never been in love, but it was like that. It felt as if my stomach was being ripped out of me. And so I got to that point, and the £3,000 ran out, and I was in a position of feeling really bad about that, because I thought, well, what do I do now? Do I go back to London? And I was doing little bits and bobs, tracing missing people and stuff for the News of the World. And I thought, do I go back to that in some scuzzy little studio apartment doing that? And I didn't want to, because I knew that the big boys that I worked for, the ex-MI6 agencies, were taking the pee out of me. They were using me for all sorts of undercover work and not paying me, which is why I was in a, not exactly a gorgeous flat, sort of. Well, it was a nice flat, but it wasn't what I should have been. I should have been in a flat in Mayfair, but there we are. And they were certainly in flats in Mayfair. So there I was, and I didn't know what to do. And I can't remember, was I sharing with Lucian at that point, or was I somewhere alone? No, I'd actually got a little share with a girl who was really lovely. And I thought, I can't pay my rent for the following month. And so I was talking to a private investigator that I knew back in London, Colin Brooke, who worked for the Telegraph, and he said to me, "Oh, you've got letters from Brady, haven't you? Why don't you sell them?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to make money out of Brady, and I never made money out of Brady." And he said, because I do believe there's a curse attached to it, and he said, "Well, why don't you sell the letters for 10 grand and give the money straight to the Primal Institute?" And I thought, oh, that's a really good idea. So he set it up, and it was ended up in the Sunday Express. And because I'd mixed with newspapers before, they always put you up in a hotel. Like Peter Bond had put me up in the Waldorf, and you always got put up in a hotel. And I always thought, this is nice, because they never paid me for the stories they did on me. But I thought, well, at least you get a bloody hotel. And so I said to the journalist that rang me, I said, "Oh, I've got nowhere to live at the moment." And she said, "Well, do you want a hotel?" And I said, "Yes, I do want a hotel." And I'd passed the St. James along Sunset Boulevard, and I'd seen it, and I just thought this looks so beautiful, and I thought, if I ever get a chance, I will go to that hotel. So I said, "Oh, the St. James, please." And so they said, "We'll just go there, and the Sunday Express credit card will be behind the desk, and check in." So I checked in there. Rod Stewart was in the bar, believe it or not. It was Rod Stewart's hotel at the time. I went and got a girl called Kathy Carlson from the Primal Institute, because she was obsessed with Rod Stewart. So she came and we had a drink in the bar on a later occasion, and she sat staring at Rod Stewart. And also they were making a film at the time called Strange Days, and actually ended up sort of getting a bit romantic with one of the guys from the movie. Ray Fiennes was in it, and so was a black girl. It's kind of a really horrible movie, but you see them coming up to the St. James and they mention it. And so that was quite interesting. And so I had a journalist babysitting me, and he had a friend called Bonnie, and Bonnie was a big Hollywood journalist, and I think she worked for the Inquirer. I'm not sure. I might be something a lot better than that. And she and he took me out to dinner, and we went to one of those really famous Los Angeles places in Malibu, and there were so many celebrities there, Al Pacino, and oh God knows, so many. And I was so excited, and Bonnie had I was excited to be with Bonnie. She was so amazing. She had all these stories about Martin Sheen, about Cher. Oh my God, so much gossip about them. She was enthralling. And so we had that evening, and she kept being rather mean to the journalist that was minding me, the British journalist who was her boyfriend. But the next day he came, and I was lying by the pool and I was crying. He said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "It's the therapy I'm doing makes you like this." And I had my hair done for the pictures. I was crying all the time when the guy did my hair. And Colin arranged for the money to be paid that ended up being 8,000 when it was transferred over, and I don't know why that was, but £8 was paid straight to Barry Bernfeld at the Primal Institute. I didn't want to touch it at all. And not any big kind of moral thing with me. I just know that there's a curse attached to it. And I didn't want to touch it. So I had this big store up of money for therapy, and I was quite excited. So the paper was due to go to bed on the Friday night, and I think it came to Saturday, and I was out with the journalist again. I can't remember his name, and we went to the bar, and I was crying again, and he said, "What is the matter with you?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing therapy." I said, "It's bringing up stuff. I'm getting really bad flashings of Brady's murders." And he said, "Well, just forget it." And I said, "How can I forget it when he kissed me?" And he went, "What are you talking about?" And I told him the whole thing with more tears. And, he said, "That's abuse." And I said, "Well, I don't know what it is, but it really feels as if he's poured all his demons inside me." It was horrible. I kept getting flashings of what he had done. I said, "It feels like some kind of spiritual thing." And so I'm pretty sure that was Saturday night. And then next morning, I woke up and I was given the newspaper, and it had on the front, "Brady sexually abused me with me." And I thought, well, hang on. I told you that in complete confidence. I thought the paper had been, that story had gone, you'd paid me for it, and you didn't. First of all, if you're going to, say someone sexually abused you, first of all, it's worth twice as much than what they paid the Institute. And I could have, been going to the Institute for like the next 3 or 4 years, which I felt I needed to. And so I thought, how dare they do this? And secondly, yeah, that was the main actually annoyance. But it wasn't true. So it wasn't really fair on Brady, much as he's a skank. It's not really fair to say someone sexually abused you when it's questionable, because they were shot up with drugs, and they probably, in his mind, perhaps he thinks he's attractive. I don't know. Clearly, speaking like Sean Connery, maybe he thought he looked like Sean Connery. So it's not really fair. And I had a strong feeling about how Brady would take it. And he's such like a very weak man. I felt incredibly guilty about that. I felt guilty enough with handing over all the letters, but whatever, I needed therapy. It's fair enough. But not to say something like that. And I was absolutely mortified. There was nothing I could do about it. And Brady took the Sunday Express to court, but he decided to fight it by saying that I had lied and he hadn't gone anywhere near me, and his hair was brown, and I had described it as grey, and which is not, his hair is grey at the front and brown at the back, but whatever. And that I had sat with him for 10 minutes, and then he had asked me to go. Not true. None of it was true. And he is easily provable in a court of law. I got quite cross and told the Express I was willing to stand up in court. And they took it to court, and the judge threw it out because they said you can't possibly malign someone like him. Now, his creep of a lawyer, Makin, went running outside to the waiting press and announced that Brady had won. Now, it wasn't true. Now, the Independent went and printed that. It still hangs on Google to this day. And then the Sunday Express said, hang on, Indy, you can't do that. And then they made the next day, they wrote a little grovelling asked kiss to the Sunday Express and said, "Oh, sorry, we've got it completely wrong. The case is thrown out because you can't malign a serial killer." So it didn't really come to court. But my suffering was still going on. And luckily, the 8 grand, which is a pittance compared to what it should have been, if you're going to say you were sexually abused and it's on the front page. So thanks, Sunday Express, for ripping me off in that way. Has nothing to do with the editor there now, who's an honest man. But then that was thoroughly dishonest and abusive to me, the whole thing, really. And to leave me at the edge of the wrath of someone like Brady, who then goes bitching to his Walsey, Alan Keithley, and sits there lying to him and tells him a load of crap. And of course, it's exactly what Kylie wants to hear. So he wants to think, well, I was with you the longest. So he goes away like a good little boy and writes up his little turgid little shit that Brady hands out to him like a good boy. It's absolutely pathetic. So that was my experience, and Barry Bernfeld was an amazing therapist, and I stayed at the Primal Institute, and I got better, and I got all the neurosis out of me born by child sexual abuse. My father put me through. My mother was sexually abusive too, and so was my adoptive brother. I had a lot to get through, and I came back to this country really, really delicate. I could barely walk down the street. They smashed every bone in my body and to get to what was inside and pull it out. And it's quite a rough therapy. So although they can do it, they can do it all right. I used to have a drink. I wasn't an alcoholic, but I used to have a drink. I used to have to get drunk, as all young people do. I was in my 20s. Friday night, I used to have to. I used to crave it. Yeah, it's Friday, great. Pouring the beer down. Since I did primal therapy, I haven't looked in the direction of alcohol. It just doesn't mean anything to me. It just doesn't have any effect on me, because all the tension that was in my body, that is in people's body, that I need a drink, that tension, primal therapy drains it away, almost like sinus draining. It drains it away. And I remember coming back from a retreat and laying on my bed in the flat I shared with Lucian, and it poured out of me. I can feel it pouring out of me, poured out of my fingertips. It was weird. And actually, if I can say what it was that came out of me, I would call it need poured out of me, poured out of my body. So I came back and I started to get my feelings back, because they weren't frozen, and all the need wasn't sort of on top of it, weighing it down. So little me that was inside could emerge, but it was quite scary, because you're coming into a world as a new kind of being that's stepping forward, but it's a world that previously bat the shit out of you. So you're rather like a tiny little bird coming out of an egg. And I rented a bedsit and tried to get my work back, and approached the Sunday Mirror and the News of the World and started to work for them, moved into a better flat, and gradually moved into journalism and started writing about the real IRA, and got very, very close to the real IRA. And in a way, same way as I got close to Brady, I picked on one particular person and burrowed in really tight. I was very good at doing it and got very close. I was the only journalist that was there, confident, and was noticed for my stories by the Sunday Times, by Liam Clark. Liam Clark then employed me, and I got my byline in the Sunday Times, and I rose quite high. And then it was while I was a journalist, and after I had my son, that I discovered Kenneth Bianchi, the Hillside Strangler, and I burrowed close to him and was sent out by The Guardian to interview him. When I returned, they didn't like what I'd written, even though they'd liked the first 6,000 words. They didn't like the second 6,000 words. It was supposed to go on the cover of their magazine. They said, no, we don't actually like what you've written. Can you write in a certain way? You were scared of him, blah. But I wasn't actually scared of Bianchi, so I couldn't give them what they wanted. And so they stuck it in Reader's Experience. Yes, listener, the abuse goes on and on. And whenever I get a troll who's someone who's quite angry with me, they get a link to what Merope Mills. She cut my story to bits. Then she put it in the Reader's Experience, not mentioning I was a journalist, and called it I befriended a serial killer, befriended, and yet she sent me out there as a journalist to write a piece. She commissioned me, and I still have the contract, yet she calls it I befriended. And Kenneth Bianchi hates women. He's not going to make a friend of me. So it's absolutely absurd. And anytime some pissy little creep gets upset with me, they get a link from that. And then they post it. Look at her, yeah. She likes serial killers. Yep, it's out there, and I actually see it as Merope Mills's shame, not mine. I have never shit on another journalist. I've never shit on another human being in the race to get a job. I've never shit on people in that way, and good things happen to me. So I can claim those good things. If you shit on people, you're going to get bad things come to you, and you're going to have to claim them. So yeah, then I wrote In for the Kill. So In for the Kill had a picture of Brady on the front and Kenneth Bianchi, and it was called A Diary of Hunting Evil. And there I was being trolled. And this particular troll said to me, "You've had a really absurd life. Your life's silly, sucking up to evil." And actually, I started to think, well, hang on, maybe he's right. Okay, there was the ambition there to be, thought of as a good writer, and after all, there are these crime writers out there, but it didn't really sit right with me. And I thought, yeah, I don't want to be a crime writer. I don't want to be that. Why am I doing this? And it was in that frame of mind that Anna Hart came to me, and she said, "You're a Monarch slave." She said, "Everything you do is for them." And I'm like, well, what do you mean them? And she was saying all this while I was busy being trolled. So my troll, Simon, yes, it's you, Simon, I hope you're listening, was saying, "Oh, you're mad," or "Your mad adventures with evil men." And she was saying, "You're a mind-controlled asset for them." And I'm like, because I thought every way I look, there's like, you can be that mad like the troll is saying, or you can be that mad like Anna Hart is saying. And I felt really confused, and I wanted to get rid of Anna, but she was this quite beautiful American, and I love Americans, and so I kept her on. She put me in a little group of people that had been mind controlled, and gradually over time I began to see that I was really like these women, and it was like an onion and kind of peeling off layers of an onion. And I met a guy called Douglas Dietrich through that, which led to me having this radio show. And when I went on his radio show, he said, "You met the serial killer and he kissed you, and the other serial killer and the real IRA leader, and you ended up underneath him with him pumping away." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, "None of it was organic. None of it was you." And I wept my eyes out, because it was like I was seen for the first time, and he said, "You're a slave and you do all those things to the agenda." And it's actually the agenda of MI6, backed by the Vatican, because I grew up in a Vatican orphanage and then made my way into being trained by an ex-MI6 agency. So it made me feel quite clean to wash it off. So unlike Alan Keithley, who's been to see Brady, he can't ever shower that off. He doesn't get Douglas Dietrich to say, "That's not organically you." He is actually someone that willingly goes to see a crud and someone that smells of urine. So, hey, don't come up to me and call me names. You're not worthy of even touching my toenail. Okay? So, anyway, that was how I began to write my book, to rewrite my whole story, and it's in the book Programmed to Murder. And it is interesting. How does somebody become a monarch slave? What is it? How do they start? Who does it to them? How do their slave masters get hold of them? Is this out there? Do they do it to other people? If you Google monarch mind control, Britney Spears, Beyonce, loads and loads of pop stars come up. There are different categories. Some are for sex slaves, some are for music industry, some of them of the spy industry. There's another category, quite interestingly. The two guys on the front cover of my book, In for the Kill, Brady and Bianchi, there's a serial killer department for these monarchs. So it made a quite interesting circle that made me feel exonerated for being interested in Brady in the first place, was because you can smell his story doesn't quite ring true. There's something about it, and Erica Gregory has looked into the occult side of it very, very well. There's something that doesn't quite ring right. Is he a common or garden rapist, paedophile, scum, or has something else gone on? And I could see it more with Bianchi, with his alters with Steve, because these monarch mind control people get split, and then a certain part of them is hypnotized, and it's the hypnotized part that the handler reaches, and they reach them in dreams, they reach them through other people. It's all very occultish, but if you want to study it, you have to study the occult. Not many people want to do that. I certainly didn't want to do it, but I had to, and I found myself sinking and sinking down the rabbit hole, and actually ending up at the bottom of the rabbit hole with someone called Colonel Michael Aquino. Now, Colonel Michael Aquino was probably what I was looking for all the way along the line. He is what's known as a white rabbit handler, the same as Rupert Murdoch, and the girls, especially the spies, are hypnotized to a theme of Alice in Wonderland. So I would be known as an Alice, and I would be triggered using Alice ploys, and they, Michael Aquino, would come to me, like Rupert Murdoch, would come to me in a dream as a white rabbit. This all sounds completely way out and bizarre, but trust me, Google it. I haven't made it up myself. It is something that has been discovered. Fritz Springmeier wrote a really, really good book about it. I've now written a really, really good book about it because I studied it for the last, gosh, it's getting on. It must be about four years, maybe more, that I've discovered it. And the more you learn about it, the more you kind of get sucked down the rabbit hole, and the more you realize then who is really behind it. I knew it was so intricate and so occultish, it couldn't be human. Couldn't be humans that were behind it. And then you find out that who's behind it is the Draco reptilians, and basically the fallen angelic. And well, no, actually, they're different. Sorry, fallen angelic is they probably were behind it actually, but there's also the machinations of the Draco reptilians who keep us all in a matrix. So you get really to the nitty gritty of evil and what evil actually is. Nobody in mainstream wants to hear it. Even when I went on the BBC Helen Hill's documentary about evil, she didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear. She said, "I'm not going to woo-woo land with you." What a shame. Intelligent woman doesn't want to hear it. Would really rather think that humanity holds the key to the evil that's spreading over planet Earth. Like, oh, it's ISIS, it's the Muslims, or oh, it's Brady, serial killers, it's this, it's that. It's not me, it's there. No, actually, it's much more powerful than that, and it really does want planet Earth, and it's really got it in its grip, and it's going to squeeze that much tighter. And when it does squeeze tighter, there's going to be certain people that are going to realize then that pointing to over there or pointing over to there isn't really washing, that there's something far more powerful than, oh, it's the Muslims, or oh, it's this or that. Something far more powerful than that going on. It's not human, okay? And it really hates humanity and really wants it to be a even more of a slave race to it, but an openly. We're now slaves, but we're not openly. But this energy wants it to get worse here, so we're open slaves. So we're totally degraded out in the open. So we suffer out in the open. So this planet becomes a planet of pure suffering because they want to really descend here and make it their home for their master. So their master being Satan. So that is what's going to go on. here, and it's quite interesting. So if you want to read my book, it is all in there. It's called Program to Murder. Yep. So read it and learn in a day or so, however long it takes you, what I took years and years. Well, I took years and years to learn, but please look at the spiritual aspects of it. Oh, we're going to break. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'm sorry I was a latecomer.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Join the Sacred Matrix with hosts Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson, 6 p.m. Eastern Time here on Revolution Radio.
Here we free ourselves from the God spell, transform the perverted matrix to the divine one. We become conscious and we embrace universal, unlimited love.
We feature colorful guests and topics such as extraterrestrials, ghosts, interdimensionals, and aliens. We examine evidence, anomalies, archaeological ruins, and anthropology.
We explore past lives, future lives, life between lives. We get into astral projection, near-death experiences, archetypes, visions, and dreams.
Episodes include time travel, teleportation, counseling, spirituality, tantra, relationships, peace, shamanism, peak experiences, and ego transcendence.
Join the lessons Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com for the Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed, people working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined by the banks. Open your eyes to the banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said. He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at spacedoutradio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio, It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Enjoy your
extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big-ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble. Come on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Oh, hi. Christine Joan Hart back for the second part of the show and coming to you live from London. It's a dark night tonight in London. It's really, really cold. We English don't like it when it's cold. We get very upset. And I've just seen on the news, actually, that it's going to be double figures over Christmas. So it's awesome that it's going to get really warm over Christmas. It's going to get really tropical here. So I'm really pleased about that because I sure hate the cold. It really, really does get me down. So fantastic. I'm really happy. So I want to talk in the second half about, I just want to carry on really. So basically I got to telling you about the Alice in Wonderland themes. So basically these programs, I believe they started way back in ancient times. Some people think they started in ancient Egypt, this mind control monarch stuff, monarch being a butterfly, certain type of butterfly. And these systems started back then. They were certainly continued with Mengele, Joseph Mengele, in the concentration camps. He did a lot of experiments on children using the mind control. So basically if they can get hold of a child, they were lucky enough to get hold of me. I was in an orphanage, so they had pure access, and Fritz Springmeier wrote about how they use children in Catholic orphanages. And so I was in denial for quite a long time after this woman told me it happened to me, and obviously I didn't want to be someone that something like that had happened to them. One part of me was glad because I didn't want to have a Brady stain on me, or even a Bianchi stain, or even a Real IRA stain, and it felt good to be able to wash that off and know that it didn't come from me. I'd felt that all along, so it was just like taking off a smelly overcoat that didn't belong to me and feeling very freed up. So, but I still sat in denial, and it was quite hard to then read Fritz Springmeier's book on mind control and then realize that, you kind of go through stages of realizing that it happened to you, and all of a sudden all the bits of your life make sense. And even my interest in the IRA arrived wholesale in my head, and I always thought it was weird. And I remember when I went to live in New York and somebody saying to me, was I going to stay? And I said to them, well, I kind of need to get permission. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, it's like I kind of get permission, but I don't know who I'm getting permission from. And obviously this guy thought I was completely crazy, and I knew it sounded crazy, but I said, when the wind blows, then I move with it. And I kind of knew that I was somebody's. I knew I was owned. When I thought about it in any great depth, which wasn't very often, I just assumed that maybe, it was angels or something. I didn't for 1 minute think I was a schmuck victim to people on earth that were using me. I thought it was higher beings maybe, and I was, on a certain mission or something. So I went along with these ideas that used to arrive wholesale that didn't really fit with any agenda I had. The IRA was one that arrived wholesale inside my head, and I remember just going to the library and pulling books off the shelf about Shankill Butchers, Martin Dillon. I bought everything Martin Dillon in the bookshop Martin Dillon wrote. And as I was reading The Dirty War and reading about how the South Armagh Brigade, it's the worst brigade, torture their victims by making them sit on a cooker, and a certain journalist called Martin O'Hagan had written about them, and they'd tortured him as well, set fire to him, and all these torture methods that they use to people, just when they feel like it, they're just slightly suspicious. It's a very paranoid terrorist organization, very hardcore at the core of the provisional IRA. So that's South Armagh. And I remember reading it, and as I was reading, kind of put the book down, and I thought, oh, hang on, I'm not going to go and get involved with these people, am I? And it was just that. So I'm just going to turn that off because, or it'll drive me crazy. So, it's going to have to go right off. So I had the thought, oh, I'm not going to get involved with those guys, am I? Or I'm not going to get involved over there in South Armagh, am I? And the answer came back that yes, I was. And I remember then getting using the News of the World, really, who I was working for at the time, to pay for my travel first class, by saying there was a story over there or what have you. And they handed out tickets pretty easily. You just go to the travel desk and book it. And you were supposed to travel business class, but then when you got to the desk of British Airways, you would say, "I'm from the News of the World," and you'd have your little bit of paper with the travel arrangements with the News of the World head on. You'd say, "This is me," and look them in the eye, or they would say, "Oh, first class, of course." And so it was always nice. And then I'd get a free hotel. So I found myself going to Belfast every single weekend, and I would go there and I would just sit on a bus and travel round to certain parts and then come back. And I found myself doing that a lot. And I was just desensitizing myself to when I finally went over there and finally got involved. And I made my contacts through a man called Terry Harkin, who was a member of the INLA, who killed Mountbatten. And I saw his name in a newspaper, and a journalist had written about him. And so I rang him up, and we got to meet, and we had a drink. And it was through him that he told me when the Real IRA were coming to London, and I told the Sunday Mirror, and the Sunday Mirror said to go along undercover. So I went with Graham Johnson, and we went undercover, and it's kind of stupid to go undercover. And so I wanted to announce who we were straight away. And there I forged a bond with one of the leaders, and eventually they agreed to an interview, and I went back to South Armagh and had to go through a bit of a kind of ring of fire to get the interview, which was quite awful. And I remember when they put me in a room, when they were trying to find out this and that about me, and I remember thinking, oh, now here's the bit where I have to sit on a cooker. And there I was in the centre of South Armagh, and I'd been reading about it in the book The Dirty War. And the next thing, really not much later than I'd first read about them, I never read anything about the IRA. It was only a couple of months, there I was in a room with the South Armagh Brigade all around me, who were then calling themselves the Real IRA, and, attempting to meet their head. And it just seemed weird. And I started to think, what am I doing here? I must be mad. And I kind of flipped into a different part of me where I thought, what the hell am I doing here? I'm not even a proper journalist, really. I'm an investigator. And then I started to think about what if they found that out. But I'd already left stuff in my bag that they were questioning. So I had to tell them all of that about, oh, I'm not actually a journalist. I'm an investigator. And that didn't go down too well. And it was all really rather horrid. But in the end, it somehow served to get me closer to them, because it was all so absurd. And they decided to use me as someone that they could put stories out through what they were doing in their prisons and etc., etc. In the end, I became like a mouthpiece for them, that anytime there was a bomb in London, such as the Ealing bomb, all media outlets and television would ring me and ask me what they were doing. And it felt really ugly, especially if people were hurt, which they always were, that I felt like a mouthpiece for something evil. And I had just washed clean from Ian Brady, so to be doing that. And I remember being at a meeting, one of their meetings, and I'd gone along. It was another one in London, and Francie Mackey was there, and he is political and also military. It's quite a hard dude. And I went along, it was in Kilburn, I went along quite late, and he was there, and he said, "You can't come upstairs." And I said, "I've come all the way across London, so I'm coming upstairs with you." And they let me upstairs in their little private meeting. This is the second one I'd gone to in Kilburn. And yeah, it was quite interesting to kind of be there. And that felt weird because I then solidified that connection with him and then got through to some others that were over here and going back and fro. So it was all kind of strange that I found it so easy to get so very close to them. And then there was no real ending to the whole thing. I kind of became somebody that they funneled their stuff through. And I wondered where it was going because there was story after story after story in the newspapers. And then when I started working for the Sunday Express, there was story after story. And then I started doing stuff on the UDA and getting very close to John White, who was their leader, in the same kind of a way, probably using my sexuality. And then when he shot some people in a different division, and then this other division said they wanted to shoot him, everybody was looking for him, including the BBC. And I said to the BBC, "Do you want me to interview him? You can commission me if you like." And they laughed at me. They said, "You're kidding. There's people that want to shoot him. He's gone deep in hiding." And I got my boyfriend at the time to drive me down the Shankill, and I saw him in the back of a van. I just peered over and there he was. And I went over and I said to him, "Oh, John, it's me." And I strode over, and this boyfriend I had at the time, they pulled him out of this car and threw him over the bonnet of his car. I was so pleased because I really wanted to see him get a slap. He'd been rude to me, and it was fun to see. He'd said to me, "All you do for a living is chat up terrorists," and to see him being dragged out the car and thrown over the bonnet was fun because you put yourself in danger. It's not a question of not being in danger. And I went striding over to the white van where I'd seen a glimpse of John, and come to think of it, how did I see a glimpse of him? It was almost like I knew he was in the back of the van, and I went over and leaned in, and he was crouched down in a donkey jacket. And I said, "Oh, John, it's me." And he looked at me. I said, "We're friends, remember?" And I looked at him in the eye, and what a weird thing to say, because we weren't actually friends. He's a leading terrorist. He actually cut off a woman's breasts one time in a car. He went in and stabbed the couple and cut the woman's breasts off. And he became the leader of the UDA because he was so fierce and terrifying. And I said to him, "We're friends, you and I." And I looked him in the eye, and he looked back at me, and I touched him. And I said it again, "We're friends." And he let me come in the van and go off and do an interview with him, bizarrely. And nobody believed it. And then I rang my boss then, Liam Clark, for the Sunday Times, and told him what he was saying. And he said, "Where is he going?" And I said, "To Manchester." And he said, "We'll keep in touch with him." And then John texted me later to say he was in Manchester and would I come? Would I come to Manchester? And then I told the Sunday Times, and they said, "Find out where he is and we'll send one of our people." So I said where he was and I didn't go, and I think that was a mistake, because sometimes if you've got the power, you should hang on to it rather than just give it to someone else. So that ended up being a front page, and I did get my byline, but it should have been me there with John. But was odd. The whole thing was odd. And then he told me that he'd split up with his wife, and he liked me, and would I come to England? I said I wanted to remain in Belfast, but I did then eventually go back to England. So it was quite strange that if that was some kind of mission, I don't know what part I played in it. There was a story before when I first reeled John in. I rang him and I said, "Oh, I'm from the News of the World, from London. I'm over here for a little while. We should have coffee." And he came to have coffee with me with another guy, and I brought my friend Paul. I brought his mother with me, and there we were sitting on the Lisburn Road having coffee with John, and people kept coming up to him because he is famous. And I said to him, "Would you consider talking peace with the INLA?" And he said, "No, no, no, not at all." And I said, "Well, how about let's pretend you would." And he said, "But I never would." And I kind of managed to wheedle him into a position where he talked about peace with the INLA. And I wrote the story up and filed it to the News of the World thinking, that's a load of crap, but it makes me feel like I'm a proper journalist, even though I'm not. And it made the front page, bizarrely, and did have my byline on, but it was kind of weird because it said, "The UDA, John White, are willing to talk peace with heated INLA Republicans." And it was from this that the war started between them. And they started killing each other. And then John, which is C Company, which was the hardest company, had to leave, and they had to go to London, where I don't know what he's doing now. He's all of C Company have gone underground. I don't know what the UDA are doing in Belfast right now, but it was utterly destroyed. And I have to look back and see that story and say that that story was the catalyst. But then I don't know whose agenda that would serve. So after that, I came back to London and wrote in for the Kill. And Anna told me about Monarch Mind Control and how MI6 used it and how it was used on the Vatican orphans. We, at the time, as orphans I was in the Crusade of Rescue, and I was brought up by the clergy before I was adopted. And even after I was adopted, my aunt, who was a nun, took control of me and brought me to the convent quite a lot. We were taken back to the orphanage, my brother and I, but we were taken to the convent, and a lot of times I was allowed to sleep with her at the convent, but not with the other girls, in a dormitory on my own at the convent, which is attached to the priest seminary. So God knows what went on there. All this is true about Monarch Mind Control. I was a young girl, so one's mind can only boggle as to what might have gone on when I was put in a dormitory on my own with the clergy milling about. So that's kind of makes me feel weird to think about it. But it was interesting to look and see what different parts I had when I discovered Monarch Mind Control, and the fact that they do shatter the child, and they take certain part, I would say it's probably the core, and they hypnotize it using themes of Alice in Wonderland, where the core part is hypnotized into believing it is Alice, and then using the films of Alice, using the stories, it operates in a certain way to certain triggers, and that's how a slave is made. They also use other things like the Wizard of Oz and I would be a Dorothy figure, and the triggers from that would be used, and they lock up certain parts of the victim. So if you might have a strong part, or say a creative part that might give you a good career, they would put that on lockdown in certain ways. Now, it's a really unusual and technical thing, and if you really study it, it's absolutely impressive, but it's very occultic. It's very dark magic, but then beyond. Actually, it's really seems to me a lot like a lot of voodoo is involved in it. It's a certain type of occultic practice that's absolutely disgusting because it's perpetrated on children, and it's actually trafficking. It's human trafficking, because a poor schmuck who is living their life in certain ways will think that they're doing it for their own agenda. For instance, me with John White, I assumed that I was trying to be a great journalist, but then, when push comes to shove, it wasn't really. How great journalism was it to make up a story? I sat there and made him say things. I made him say he wanted to talk peace with the INLA. He didn't. He didn't. And then when I saw him again, oddly, he said to me, after it was on the front page, because then I went to Dundalk on that very day to meet a real IRA contact who was giving me a com, which is a rolled up bit of toilet paper that the prisoners write messages on, and then they roll it up, and I don't know where they put it, but anyway, there was a com, and the chap I met undid it in front of me and said, I have to undo it in front of you. You read it. I'm not going to read it. And it was all about Michael McKevitt was in prison at that point, and it was about they decided to split. How true that was, I don't know. I just probably wasn't true. They probably decided to say, well, one of us aren't going to be military anymore, and the other side is. I'm not sure actually what that was about, but it was given to me to give to the Sunday Times, and it became a story that the Real IRA were going to split into two in the prison. So that I went to meet my contact that day in Dundalk, and I took the front page of the newspaper and showed it to him, and he said, won't John White be angry then? And I said, well, who cares really? And I went to meet White, and he said, you wrote that story, you made it up. And I said, yeah, I know, but it doesn't matter, does it? And I looked him in the eye again. So strange. And he laughed. And I remember thinking at that point, wow, I must be a sexy being. I've got total power over this guy. But no, I'm thinking back to it. It doesn't really seem like that. He's not really the kind of man that would be too enamored of women. He would have groupies for sure. Not that he was good looking, but those leading terrorist men in Belfast have many, many groupies because they are leaders of different factions. And so he was pretty famous. He was pretty famous there, so he had lots of groupies. So I would have been older than his usual, probably, I was going to say 15-year-old, and then I thought, what if he's listening to this somewhere? 20-year-old then. But, they probably would prefer young girls, these men, I would say. So I don't really think I did have power of him. But I heard whispers later that he was said to be working for MI6. So I don't know. Did he maybe think that I was handling him in some kind of way? I don't know. I don't know what I was doing, but there was a lot of shoulder touching and pointed eye contact. And I've done that before when Michael McKevitt was in court. I actually went there and turned round and just looked him really hard in the eyes. And then I did the same to Liam Campbell. And then when Campbell was leaving to go down, I mean, I did know Campbell, obviously, but it was like I was trying to tell him something, and Campbell stood there for a good 5 minutes looking up at me, and I looked down at him. And then when that had finished, I went round to the cells where they were both coming and looked pointedly through the cells. And I don't really know what, but I think I was trying to say something in some kind of way to them. So when I was reading over this Monarch stuff and the mind control and how they do it, I had to think back to who my handler might have been, and I think probably it was Hugh Burnett. Hugh Burnett was in MI6, and Hugh Burnett became somebody that I would go to for advice, somebody that would give me ideas, somebody who would encourage me in this, that, and the other. So presumably he was my handler, as they say, but maybe not, because these things, this Monarch mind control, is partly carried out off-world, which is hard to believe, but it is. And so that's how they can access you in dreams and make you do things and just really jerk you about, really. And so it's quite hard to come to terms with it and what's actually going on and actually believe it. And then you get to looking back over your life and seeing different things. Like I remember being adopted by what I thought were greys. And actually now I find out that there's no such thing as these greys. They are merely like little drones for these Draco-Reptilian, and the Draco-Reptilian really have infiltrated the Vatican. So these are our controllers. So if you look at it, there are always this dark hand controlling, and the dark hand seems to go back to being a lizard hand. And I know that's quite hard to believe, but people find it easy to believe in angels. People find it easy to believe in fallen angels. People find it easy to believe in Satan, and actually that word just means attacker. So, but we've been so boxed in here that our little minds can't handle it, that there might be another species that was here before us that actually own this planet, and we have been kind of made as a slave race. And there was a lot in Zecharia Sitchin's books and the Sumerian texts, etc., about the Anunnaki, or as we sometimes call them, the Elohim, who came here and made us, used what was here, ape man, and mixed their DNA into us, and basically carried on using us as a slave race and controlling us. And there were darker factions to this, and there were some that weren't as dark. And they say some of the Elohim are on our side and are actually returning now. And I was listening to quite an interesting podcast the other week about talking to the Elohim and making contact with them. And this man was talking about how you shouldn't get on your knees. There's no need to, because they don't need you to worship them. And you shouldn't waffle your prayers, but you should just listen, which actually matches with meditation, to just be in a state of listening. And only then can they speak to you, because it's a very gentle language, and they do want to help us. It's not all darkness here, that we do have gods that care, that do love. And this is what Jesus Christ came to give this message. And interestingly, I have been listening to a man called Russ Disdar, and I do like Russ Disdar. He has done a lot on Monarch mind control victims. Sadly, he does call them satanic super soldiers. Super soldiers just means that these people have had it done to them are awake astrally, and parts of them are sometimes used for the wars on the astral, so are superconscious and have sometimes a kind of cosmic consciousness. And so he calls them satanic super soldiers, but he believes that the only cure is Jesus Christ and the blood of Christ going through the different altars that have been split in the person's soul and melding them together. So that might be true, but he also says that they are going to be used at end times, and that they are going to be given a trigger word to say, and they are all going to start rounding up the rest of the humans and helping them go into FEMA camps. I don't believe that's true, but there's a lot of people in the group I was in on Facebook that do believe that is going to happen to them. I have, sometimes it forms in my head a message that I have to give out, and it's like a slogan: the time is now. And I saw it recently. Someone had written those very same words: the time is now. And so who can know if one has been made a slave that one is no longer a slave, even though one might say, well, I was a well-kept slave, I had a bit of money, and now I don't have any money, therefore I must be on the freedom train, I must be not connected anymore, this must be the end of things, I'm probably not useful. How does one know if one still isn't acting out things that one's owners might want them to do? On the other hand, the whole thing might be absolute nonsense and not exist. But if you do Google Monarch mind control, there's so much of it, and if there is so much of something, there has to be even the tiniest grain of truth in it. Whether I was a victim or not, I don't know, because you can't really ever prove it, but I would suspect, looking at my life, that I was used for things. And I really don't know what the serial killer things were for. But Douglas Dietrich said to me that it's like me going along to Brady and getting almost his darkness, almost pushing his demon onto me, like trying to use me as a vessel. He said that would be like an occult ceremony, that he would dirty a beautiful young girl and they would get a lot out of that. And I can see that. I can see how that might almost like a kind of a sacrifice, or a kind of a blooding or a raping or something like that. I can see how. And then, of course, it's sort of given out to the masses. He did this to me, the beautiful girl. And I mean, they made me stand by the swimming pool and, take shots of my whole body, which was then put on the front page. So it's like a kind of a, oh, look, really, really evil, dirty, beautiful young girl got evil put into her. So the masses then can read it and sort of like sickly get smeared with it themselves. So perhaps it was just that. It possibly might be. And then the stuff in Northern Ireland, I seem to have acted doing this and doing that and kind of engineering a lot of things. And there's probably a lot more that I engineered that I don't think was relevant, but I was right near the top players and moving a lot of things around. And it was odd to find myself when I went to Dundalk that morning, when I was on the front pages, and my byline was on the front page. The man I met, my contact, said to me, "You're two different people." And I said, "How do you mean?" He said, one is, no, actually, it wasn't that occasion. It was a different occasion. He said to me on a different occasion that I was two different people. And one was just kind of weak and depressed. And the other was exciting. And I didn't know what he meant, because the exciting one seemed to not be afraid of anything. And then the other one he was talking about was actually me, bloody cheek, and saying it was boring, whatever. And so I did understand that. I did have that going on, actually. And it was almost like the exciting one was galvanized to do this. And sometimes I would go back into normal me and be like in a really scary position and think, what am I doing here? Why? And it's actually absolutely terrifying. Absolutely. One of the most terrifying things was to be in that room that time when I was being interrogated by the South Armagh Brigade. And I was sitting alone on a chair, and I thought they were going to sit me on a cooker. But to go from being someone who doesn't care, someone that actually doesn't care. I didn't care. I was in a state of mind where I didn't care and thought, oh, they're not going to touch me. And to be really cocksure that they weren't going to hurt me, and to think, oh God, what pansies, to going in a different state of mind, to absolutely feeling as if I was going to piss myself on the floor or run out screaming or start slapping my face and crying, help, help, out the window. I actually thought I could do that. I actually thought there was an army barracks in the centre of Crossmaglen, and I thought, if I can get out of this house, I will run towards the army barracks screaming, help me, help me, help me. And luckily I didn't get a chance. But so it was terrifying to go from being a cocksure person into being just a normal person, to find oneself in that position, the South Armagh Brigade sort of mucking around with them kind of thing, sort of yanking their chain in a way, because really I didn't have a big interview to do, but I kept saying I need to see such and such, do a big interview with him, but it was like mucking them around kind of thing. But this one part of me seemed to think it was amusing. It was all very amusing and a bit of a game. But then the other part obviously certainly didn't. Just seemed to be terrifying, and reminded me of looking back at that book and studying them in The Dirty War by Martin Dillon, and then thinking, am I going to get involved then with those people? Is that what I'm wanted to do? So I kind of knew there was something yanking my chain. When I was reading it, I thought, oh no, surely I don't have to do this. And then finding myself doing it. So it's kind of like I knew deep down, really. And then it's odd because the Bianchi thing, meeting Kenneth Bianchi, who I thought, oh, that's interesting. He's probably a monarch, and he's, after I read the book, blah, blah, I thought, oh, how interesting, he's a monarch. I hadn't bothered to write to him for a long time before the book was published. And I still haven't really worked out whether he was or not and why I went along there. But it's almost as if I had a part of me that came out when I was sitting with him that he looked at and kind of homed in on it. It's almost as if he knew somehow, and he homed in on that part and kind of smashed it and kind of brought me out. So meeting him had a massive effect on me, that it made me more whole, because it's almost like he pulled out a certain part of me and shook it, and I saw it. And so I don't know whether that was another thing or whether it was me getting clean, because after I met him, then writing the book, Anna came along, and I did eventually see everything. And a friend of mine talked to me about not having much money, not having a home, blah de blah, and they said to me that I was Draco-sentient, and I thought about that today driving home, and I thought, yes, that's right. And it does tend to grow on you that when you're spiritually growing, spiritually maturing, Does it really matter that you don't have a big house? Does it really matter that your bank account is minus, or shit? It doesn't really matter, because you're aware of the whole system. You're aware of the position you're in, and to be Dracosentian is to be aware that we're in this position, is to want to fight them in whatever way you possibly can. It is a spiritual warfare going down, and it does mean that you are light years ahead of somebody who knows nothing about any of this and merely is living in a mansion, a sort of, I don't know, Real Housewives of Sydney or something. It does, of course they're probably having a nicer time, but you don't really need a nicer time. You can meditate, and if you do connect to the good Elohim, I'm probably saying them, the angelic, basically, the gods. If you connect through meditation, then it's far better than any mansion or any trip to Singapore or any hotel swimming pool. You really do feel almost like your consciousness is coming alive, and every part of you, every chakra is being burst out and cleaning, and you're really becoming almost like a star and fighting against the darkness that's overwhelming the planet, and becoming something that can be used as a weapon against the darkness. So you're useful. You might have a life that's full of poverty, but you're useful. How much better is it to be useful to the gods than it is just to have good clothes and live in a mansion? You're much better off, because when we get rid of this body, you'll just rise higher, and you will be in your spiritual home. You won't be looking around confused like a rabbit without its hutch and its smells that it knows. You will be spiritually ascended and switched on and truly awakened, fully awakened, not just knowing about this. The physical body has to come with you too. That has to ignite as well. You can't leave it behind. We are in it, and the war is going on here too, and it's getting pretty nasty. So anyway, I'm coming to the end of the show, and that's a good thing for me, because I came in tonight and I just cooked something, and I was just throwing in courgettes and tarragon and green beans and cooking something, and I didn't have time to eat it. So I'm absolutely starving, and it's downstairs on the hob, and it's cooling now, so it'll just be perfect to do with some rice, and I am absolutely so hungry. And I've done the show without eating, so I hope I have made my points and made them succinctly. I hope so. Sometimes it's difficult if your blood sugar level is all over the place. So I have put most of this in my book. It's programmed to murder. I wish I had a better title than that, and I've fooled around with different titles. I can't find a title really that really would fix it. I would like a proper publisher, but it's hard if you're talking about stuff like that, occultic stuff. Is there a publisher that will handle it? Not really, only the smaller ones. And then if you can go for the smaller ones, you might as well just put it on Amazon yourself, because it's quite difficult to get any money out of the smaller ones. They tend to, be all too eager to rip you off, which can be not a very good experience. So I have taken to giving readings, because usually I used what gifts I had in my work. I am clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. I can go down timelines. I can see people's past lives. So I am, through somebody else, set up a website to do that for people. If you're interested in looking it up, it is www.chrisjohart.com. So you can go on there and I can do a session with you over Skype if you have any kind of thing that you believe leads back to a previous life, or you need cords cutting, or you're just having trouble and you can't move forward in some kind of way, or perhaps it's a relationship, and I can look into him and whether you guys are meant to be together. There's a lot of soulmate meeting going on, but often our soulmates, we're not ready for them. We're sick in various ways. I mean, most of us are highly neurotic. So if you meet your soulmate down in the 3D, a lot of times you're going to be absolutely repelled by them, absolutely horrified, because they're going to have all your faults magnified. So anything you don't want to see in yourself will be shining out of them. So if you do even get together, which doesn't really happen all that often, it will be often something that will be torn apart. So that can be painful, because then it's hard then to settle for something else. If you've met your soulmate, you're not really going to be able to entertain other people, so that then will leave you by yourself. So it's all very complex. So if you need help with that, www.chrisjohart.com, and I will see what I can do to help you. I'm also on Facebook, and I think Chris J. Hart on Facebook, even though somebody read my numbers and said to use Christine Hart because it's much better. And ever since they've told me that, I'm like, she's right. It sounds better. But there's so many Christine Harts. There's like so many of them, if you Google it, that it's difficult. But I think I will probably use it. I can't stand my name. I'd like to call myself something else. But stuck with it, sadly. So it's started to rain in London. We have had a forecast that it's going to be a tropical Christmas. So exciting, because we've had snow. We had snow last week on the Thursday, and all of us panicked, and I panicked too, and went to the supermarket and brought up loads of tinned goods because I thought I was going to be snowed in for like weeks. That's what it said in the newspapers, and supermarket shelves were like totally empty, water, all of us panicking. The next day it melted and it hasn't come back. So it's like, that's what the English do, the tiny spattering of snow. But that is it. So it seems we're going to have a lot of heat. So fantastic. So thank you for joining me for the show. And I hope it wasn't too hard for you to stay all along for the whole 2 hours. I hope you did. And hope it's taught you something. I hope the show has been worthwhile. It's reached some ears, and it will make it worthwhile. I do my show on a voluntary basis. If you want to donate to me through PayPal, it's warnernews@sky.com is the email that you'll use. That's warnernews@sky.com. If you want to donate to Revolution Radio, please go to their website, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and there's a donate button there. You can help to keep the radio shows going. It's all done voluntarily, and nobody is paid for anything. We do it to awaken people, make them aware, and try and add to the light. Talking of the light, I actually saw a shooting star last night. I was out of my bedroom window. I was looking at the stars. So I'm lucky enough to live on the river just temporarily. It's just rented. But it's on the river, and the stars, you can see the stars a lot more. It's out of London. And it was a shooting star, and I've seen them before, and they're not bright, but this one was super bright, and actually just like a kid had got a paintbrush of silver paint and just went shoosh like that, and it just like burst. And then it fell, and it was absolutely awesome to see. It was like really, it was a real big one. And so awesome to see a shooting star, or perhaps a falling star. I don't really know the difference. So if you like the show, please click below and subscribe. And leave a comment. It's always helpful if you leave a comment and tell me what you'd like other shows to be about. I often have guests, so please put your ideas below and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much for listening. God bless.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Message to our listeners. Revolution Radio is you. Thanks to your continuous support and participation, Revolution Radio will embark
to its 8th year. Yoo-hoo!
Bigger and better than ever. You, the listeners, have made Revolution Radio what it is. The #1 commercial-free talk radio station on the web with nearly 24 hours of live programming, delivering directly to you the most cutting-edge information available. You, the listeners, have become some of our most popular radio hosts. You, the listeners, offer feedback that molds our programming to appeal to a worldwide audience. You, the listener, provide eyes on the ground, reporting about newsworthy events in your area, and you, the listener, are the lifeblood of this station. We love you, and thank you for being a treasured member of our Revolution Radio family. From all of us to all of you, have a happy and safe holiday season, and let's make this new year a success once again together. Thank you.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your